see here. Does this mean we're live? Doing an experiment tonight, guys. Trying to go live on TikTok too. Hopefully it doesn't mess anything up. What's happening? Oh, I guess we are live on TikTok. Hell. Aha. Hi, guys. So it is 11:11. I had a music stream planned for tonight, but my machine was all laggy, so I decided that I couldn't handle the train wreck of the sound. So instead, I decided to pop on and talk a little bit about the holy guardian angel, the higher self. The ancient Greeks, actually didn't consider demons necessarily evil. They were either or. They could be good or they could be evil. They, particularly the good ones, would guide people to their destinies. They would lead them through all sorts of remarkable trials and tribulations in order to teach them things, and they would lead them to their destinies. And I realized, I don't know if it's probably more than a week ago now, that I have had that link with that personal daemon, that higher genius, since I was a child. And I think I've known that for a really long time, but I have been plagued with doubt for a number of reasons, one of them being institutionalized gaslighting, right? Our culture, if you hear voices in your head and they tell you to do things, then you're probably schizophrenic, right? But what if that voice is always telling the truth and you don't feel compelled to do anything it says, and you always suffer if you don't? You know what I mean? It's quite a different story. So I guess, over the years, I even tested it like really dramatically. I came up with things that I would do intuitively that were improbable to the point of near impossibility, and they would routinely work out. So somehow that still wasn't enough. It wasn't until the other day that I realized that the objective that I was given when I was like 20 and all the details had actually played out, and I just hadn't put it together because I didn't show up for the main event, basically. And when that clicked, I realized, like, okay, there's absolutely no doubt about this. And I still don't know what the nature of the phenomenon really is, right? Like, is it like the drummer in my band thinks it's a supermind that lives in our gut? I haven't fully determined, like Aleister Crowley didn't decide that Aiwass was for sure something other than his subconscious. The issue that I have with that is that whatever this was clearly knew many, many years in advance, many, many things about my future. It knew where I should be and when. It knew who I should talk to and when I needed to be there. And I really have a hard time explaining that with just pattern recognition or, a supermind in the gut or whatever. There seems to be something far more to it than that, and it does leave you with a ton of questions, because it's not like I can just access any information I want. It's not like it's always present. There was definitely a period where it was present a lot, and it seems like, looking back, that it was sort of like the critical moment, that it was there out of necessity. The guidance and the lessons and everything were necessary. Another interesting facet of this is that a lot of people seem to experience it the same exact way. My hero, I guess, I hate to put it that way, but I don't have a better word at the moment, it was Jerry Garcia, kind of a model for what I hope to do, to raise consciousness by playing music. And so I had this experience that I just described where this voice was present a lot, and I described it as having hollow, awful laughter. And many years later, I was randomly on the internet, and I found an interview with Garcia called Magical Blends. Oh, I should mention also, I came to call this part of my life a phoenix process, right? Sort of being forged in flames. And, you know, anyways, Magical Blends with a K, which is important to the story, or important to my story. And I had read a book that was supposed to be every interview that Garcia ever did, and it was not in there. So, you know, I'm just noting the timing. You know, it's almost like certain things are hidden from us until the moment where it makes sense for us to become aware of them. And I had just started calling it the Phoenix process. This was like a year after it started to kind of die down a little bit. And I started reading the article, and he said, when I was 31, and that's how old I was too. He said there was this voice for a while that kind of taught me things, and it was really harsh and like kind of like a Dutch uncle, which is another thing that I called it, a Dutch uncle. He said it had this hollow, mocking laughter. I used the words hollow and awful. He used the words hollow and mocking. And then when I managed to look back at my phone after the shock wore off, the next line was, I came to call it my Phoenix process. And, you know, my head almost exploded because, I mean, you guys get it. You know, that was just a crazy thing to see Garcia describe this experience exactly the same way with the same adjectives and give the process the same name. That's another reason that I wonder about the objective existence of this thing. You know, is it actually God? Is it a spirit? Is it multiple spirits? You know, it presented itself that way throughout the course of this experience too. Like there were sort of attendants or something, like these three little women that I would see in my mind's eye, and they would kind of take notes when I was thinking of stuff that I needed to manifest, and then they would like scurry off. They were kind of dressed like nurse elves or something. But mostly it was this thing with the hollow mocking laughter. And it knew all sorts of shit that I couldn't know. It knew that there was a solar storm occurring and had me go out and do a solar ritual during the solar storm. I found out the next day, I saw in the paper that it was like the most intense solar storm in 26,000 years estimated or something. And let's see, what else did it know? Oh yeah, I was talking to my mom one day because I was named after a guy that she was like really close with as a teenager. How's it going, daughter of Odin? She was really close with this guy as a teenager, and she tried to name me after him. But my fake dad, he wasn't my biological dad, but they told me he was until I was 11, of course, 11. Anyways, he was at the hospital, and he's like, no, you have to at least change the order of the names and add Harley. But anyways, the guy's name was Michael James, so my middle name is James Michael. And she told me that he died on a motorcycle accident. And suddenly I just knew it wasn't true. So I called her up and I said, what really happened to Michael James? And she was just quiet. And that voice said, ask her about Steve Miller. And she was just dead silent. And she's like, that's the guy that drove, or that hooked up with his girlfriend that provoked him to commit suicide or accidentally kill himself or whatever. Should be noted, my fiance around this time, her fiance prior to me had died. So this guy did this on a golf course. He huffed, what's it called? Dust off and drank on a golf course and died, right? My fiance's fiance before me drank alcohol while huffing dust off and died while playing PGA golf, right? So that's weird as hell too. The point is though, this thing clearly knew all sorts of stuff, you know? And it's not always like a voice either. Sometimes it's just like, I just suddenly know something. And I can definitely tell the difference between like a normal thought or a normal impulse or suspicion or something, and when these downloads or whatever they are occur, you know, there's like a weight to it. And we were talking about this in the patron-only Discord today, you know, how to tell the difference. And my opinion is that you always do know, whether you have doubt or not. you know when this happens for real. But yeah, I mean, on one occasion, I started describing how there would be a pandemic and that it would be used as an excuse to force a thingy, and that those thingies would contain a microchip that would be used to control people, and that the NWO would deploy a bunch of satellites around this time connected to an AI module. And I was talking to the singer in my band in my kitchen at this time, and he said, when is this going to happen? And I said, this shit will hit the fan in 2020. You know? So, like, and I have tons of examples like that. The reason it's important, the reason it's important, I think, is that we are all, this is our birthright, you know? It is something I think that has to be attained. There is a process. I'm not really sure exactly how I was born with it, except that some people say that if you establish the link with the Holy Guardian Angel in one lifetime, it's just there for the rest of your life, or the rest of your lifetimes, you know, every incarnation. And that's good enough for me, I guess. But I've been thinking a lot lately about this whole NWO situation, you know, regardless of your political disposition, if you can't tell that there is a totalitarian regime taking root in the United States, you're like Walking Dead. Seriously. Those places in San Salvador or El Salvador, whatever the hell it is, they're concentration camps for sure. And some of the people that are being sent there were legal citizens and stuff. I mean, it's you know, it's happening. And this is another thing that during that Phoenix period process, I kind of just came up with it one day that, you know, they basically take the population control thing around like a tour around the planet. Every decade or so, it happens in a different place. You know, this may be something at Bilderberg, you know, where they all go and meet, and the press is there, but they never report a single word of it. And they draw straws like, okay, it's your turn for Holocaust, bud. You know, so they had Pol Pot and they had Stalin, and well, it's not in that order. Stalin and Pol Pot and, you know, Hitler, and now it's the U.S.'s turn. And that's one of the things that came out of my mouth for no reason during that period, is that, you know, it's the U.S.'s term for a Nazi Germany type event. So the big question that we have, you know, I feel like I came into this world to assist in the process of awakening. The veil between mankind and the ultimate reality is extremely thin. It does not take much to become aware of it. It doesn't take much to access the universal mind. It doesn't take much of a shift in order to see through the entire smokescreen. It really doesn't. It's relatively minimal. It's just that the way that the propaganda and the culture, the provisional programming from culture is engineered, it is sort of lodged very deeply in people. So it's like getting to the root and pulling it up. Even though it's not a big root, you know, it's like it's deep. So, you know, I realized very young that it wouldn't be that hard for people to like realize, to snap out of it. I always felt like the truth about where we come from, why we're here, what the universe is, you know, afterlife, all of it is accessible information. You know, that there's some process that we could employ to discover these things. And it turns out that the Hermetic sciences pretty much had it down. You know, that's probably a more recent name for it even. And I don't even like to use that term because it's really something more universal than that. You know, it is just a fact that if you don't have the programming and you're of sufficient intellect, which does not require genius, but you have to be, you know, sufficiently smart, and you learn to read the book of nature, then all of the information, all of the secrets, everything you need to know is obvious, and it's just written right on the fucking wall. And the problem for the establishment is that when people know this, they are no longer controllable. They're sovereign entities, and a couple of things happen. One of those things is that there is no dissonance, there's no interference pattern in the individual. So they are in homeostasis. And when they're in homeostasis in micro, they are in homeostasis in macro. You know? So that means that once you're in homeostasis with yourself, you're in homeostasis with your environment and your culture and your fellow man. You are basically an avatar of universal law. You're an expression of the balance of universal law. That's one of the reasons why all systems tend towards homeostasis, right? And when we see things not heading towards homeostasis, we know that somebody's shaking the ant farm, because that's the natural tendency of things. One of the Hermetic principles really is that there is a sort of baseline morality. There is a general morality that exists almost like a law of the universe that's sort of generated. It's a result, a net result of all of the vectors of the other laws, And so anyways, another way to think about it, you don't even have to be that hippie about it. Crowley just kind of said, think of it like stars in their orbit. When a person knows their purpose, they know their path, and they are totally and completely committed to it, it's almost never going to serve them to come into conflict with another entity, right? If you're thinking about even personal advantage, unless you have this skewered, inverted, perverted kind of perception that's been engineered into people, you realize that empowering the structure around you is the best way to empower yourself. The idea that it's dog eat dog and we need to maliciously, how do you say, like dissolve our competition and whatnot. Dissolve isn't the word I was looking for, but you know what I mean? Like, that's not it. That's not it. That's not how ants operate. That's not how dolphins operate. It is an illness that has been inculcated into humanity and that is being accelerated right now tremendously. Reason being that this veil between reality and the matrix that I've been describing is thinner than ever. And the potential for people to completely dissolve it and destroy it and discard it and move past it is bigger and closer and more imminent than ever. We have access to all the information, all the tools. We can educate ourselves in psychology. I just did an interview with Dr. Rachel Turetsky and Dr. Douglas Wingate. Wingate does like psilocybin therapy mixed with Chinese medicine. And Rachel, Dr. Rachel, the witch doctor, is an occultist, and she is a PhD. She has her doctorate in psychology, but she also has like a master's in, she has like 3 degrees, she's pretty smart lady. And basically what they did is they took Timothy Leary, his 8-circuit model of consciousness, and Stanislav Grof's work on perinatal and prenatal experiences, and Robert Anton Wilson kind of improved on Leary's model in the 80s and 90s, and now they've taken that and they're, recontextualized some of it and combined Grof's work with it and come up with a manual, basically, for understanding how to access your imprints, what types of imprints are connected to what type of period, and then how to metaprogram new imprints and resolve the dissonance from the aberrative imprints. So let me check out the chat. I haven't really been. Jesus is King. Goodbye. Where are my mods tonight? I play guitar and sing sometimes. How can I use my talents for good? That's actually a great question and something that I care a lot about. I recently told this story, so I apologize if you're a regular follower and it's redundant, but he brought it up, so I got to do it. In the same way that in an ayahuasca ceremony, the shaman can use an icaro to fine-tune the consciousness of an individual. For example, I had a Shipibo ceremony here a little while back, and shaman was a mahua, which is a really renowned lineage. And my ally plant, at least in the ayahuasca realm, is Bobinsana, right? And he comes and sits in front of me, and he starts singing this Ikaro to me, and the only word I understand over and over is Bobinsana, 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 Bobinsana. You know what I mean? So you tune into things, and then you provide a certain sonic catalyst that causes certain changes in people. Also, when I facilitate ayahuasca, and one of the techniques that we use is that when you drink ayahuasca, you can kind of see like a grid around people's body. The Eliphas Levi would call it the sidereal body. It's not an aura; it's a different thing. It looks more like a grid of colors, and there will be little like patches of like black and broken where they're like look like they're curled out. You know what I mean? Like almost like plastic mesh that's been cut, and you can make sound that's kind of like Inuit throat singing. Is it Inuit or I don't know where that comes from, but the throat singing thing. Where there are two pitches that are a little bit out of phase, and then you bring them into phase, and it's sort of an intuitive thing to figure out what pitches, but you kind of repair this field with that. And usually people will run and vomit after you do this. But in my world, which is as functioning as a rock musician, I noticed when I went to see, it wasn't the Grateful Dead, but it was like Grateful Dead members in a different band. And I understood after about 30 minutes of being in the audience what it was really about. And so there's this universal mind phenomena. And when the collective gestalt, I guess, kicks in, there is telepathy in the audience with the band. The band has talked about this. I've experienced it. I've done it from the stage and from the audience. Definitely a real thing. I've had audience members that don't know anything about the Grateful Dead come up to me and describe it happening to them at my shows and whatnot. So, there's no doubt that it's real. And nobody really knows exactly what it is. The Grateful Dead called it because they said they didn't know if it was like just the universal mind or some kind of thing they were avatars of. And they said it didn't always come and there's nothing you could do to force it, which is also my experience. But when they would do these long improvisations, and the reason that's necessary, by the way, is just like meditation. It takes a long time to get into an altered state. They have to kind of like, also, you're using the laws of the universe. Solve et coagula. You're dissolving the structure so that something can emerge, right? You have to create like the primordial soup of the universe before the sinusoidal wave compelled it all to symmetry. You know what I mean? So that's part of the formula as well. But I noticed that this thing would happen, and then you'd like receive this, I call it gnosis induction, right? Like gnosis inducing music. Tool does this also. There are a few bands that do it. I don't think anyone does it quite as powerfully as the Dead did. But anyways, what I noticed is that it's not in the lyrics. They don't sing the message. They don't have to sing the message. When this thing lights up the band and the audience, everyone is just sort of raised to another level. And my theory about it, and this actually was described to me by a punk rock girl, no psychedelics, no talking to deadheads about this. She told me and my bass player, you guys taught me about music tonight. Like everyone rises to the level of it's entrainment, basically is what I'm saying. Whoever's cycling the highest and the universal mind, everyone connects and you're temporarily lifted up and you don't stay up there, but you're higher than you were when you go back down, So that's basically what I'm saying to you. If you want to know how to use your music for good, I think all it takes is that you are in that place of intent and consciousness. You know what I mean? Like you have to be there as an antenna. You must be a hollow tube to bring down fire from heaven. And that's the process I can describe as well. It's probably a little bit different for everyone. And like I said, I was kind of born like this. So I can only assume, that anyone can do it under the right circumstances. I'm not 100% sure, but that's what I'd like to believe. So as far as evidence too that this is a real thing, not only did I, experience this and figure it out, but when I went out playing with the intent of doing this, like I said, the girl approached us and she said, "Can I tell you what you taught me about music?" And then she describes this. And then a couple days later, I was in the same bar, and this guy at the bar, I needed to buy a beer, didn't have enough money, and he's like, "Hey, you're that guitar player, aren't you?" And he's like, the other day you were playing some Dead here, and I never got the Dead, but I got it. It's like everyone became one mind, and there was like information being downloaded from another dimension and shit. And this was like a week after I talked to the other girl, and then I was playing guitar at a party, and this kid next to me, when I finished the song, just jumped up, and he's like, "This guy's not a musician. He's a sorcerer or a magician, and he's downloading information from another dimension." And you know what I mean? Like, you hear this all the time. And it's crazy as hell, to hear from people, but it's real. That's definitely real. So, and that's another crazy thing about it. Like, you don't have to preach. You don't have to write lyrics that convey this. I mean, I kind of did. We were all avatars of the fire and the light, born of the sun, we're creatures of the night. I mean, every now and then I would sprinkle a little bit of direct reference into that, but you don't even have to talk about it. You can make instrumental music, and if you are in that place, it'll come through somehow. Oh, the mic is on the fritz. Damn it. That's too bad, because it seems like my brain's working fairly well tonight. It seems fine to me. Better know. Yeah, I hope that wasn't going on too long. By the way, if you guys have any questions or topics or anything, I experienced telepathy the first time I did LSD with friends who were communicating, not talking. Yeah, that's another problem with this kind of stuff. What the hell? My TikTok looks like it just has a screenshot cover. It doesn't have a... Anyways, yeah, you guys, on TikTok, this is the first time I've done this on TikTok too, so please share the live and try to get people in here. And don't forget to pay me. It's always really good to pay me, because I'm demonetized on both shits. I can't get paid on any social media anywhere, I don't think, because they really hate me. Everywhere. I've been blocked from monetization. Twitter, even X. I can't advertise on X. They blocked my account. I've never had a violation, but I criticize Musk a lot. That's his version of free speech for you. But okay, so yeah, the mystery always presents itself in a way that casts doubt upon itself. This is a real pain in the ass. It's still fritzing, isn't it? In a way, it shouldn't really matter, because traditionally there was a edict of silence, that you weren't supposed to talk about this stuff. In fact, I'm on the fence about whether I ever should have talked about all this stuff on YouTube, But one of the ways that happens is something like psychedelics. I also, the first time I experienced telepathy to a degree that was absolutely undeniable, we had both eaten a small amount of mushrooms. I mean, I could barely tell that I ate them. But I was walking down from the peak of a mountain in Telluride. My girlfriend had gotten in a pickup truck and gone up to the top of a different mountain, so she was pretty far away. And I was having a hypothetical conversation in my head with a certain person, and then I walked up the sidewalk and I ran into a Burmese mountain dog, and a tear ran down my eye because I was upset about something. And then I went to the car and realized I didn't have my keys, and I was cold and I needed my clothes. And 10 minutes later or something, I see my girlfriend walking up, and she's like, "Oh my God, she knew every word of the conversation between me and the hypothetical person." I'm not even convinced that it wasn't actually telepathic now, really. But she knew it word for word, and there was nothing to indicate that would be happening. It's not like I told her I was thinking about this person or nothing at all to set it up. She knew every fucking word, and she knew about the Burmese mountain dog, and she knew that I went to the car and couldn't get in because she had the keys, and that I was cold. She knew everything. And when she was done, telling me all this, I was like, "How do you know all this?" And she just said, "They told me." And so I guess she experienced it like it was being dictated to her. Yeah. So For sure that happens. My partner and I actually have this happen from time to time too. When we first we weren't involved even. We hadn't even kissed, so this makes no sense. But she sent me a message while I was thinking, like, I bet she doesn't like the idea of marriage. And my phone beeps, and she's like, I think I'm starting to think differently about marriage. Just like that, you know. And we have shared dreams sometimes too. I woke up one day after dreaming that we had chopped the neighbors up. It wasn't bloody. It was like they were made of clay or something, you know, like it wasn't gory or anything. And it didn't seem dark even, you know, but that's what it was. And we were stacking the like neighbor logs, and she wakes up and she goes, man, I had the weirdest dream that we were cutting the neighbors up like firewood, and there was no blood or anything, but we were like stacking them like firewood. And I was like, holy shit, man. It's wild stuff. All right, let me check in with the chat again. Remind me of Chuck Swindoll. Oh, but yeah, what I was saying about paying me, that's important. I didn't finish that thought. There are options to support the channel in the chat, and also you can become a patron, and then you can join our Discord chat. We're working on building a high-frequency trading arbitrage bot so that we can actually empower each other in a meaningful way. And there's 6 years of premium content, and you can get consultations and guitar lessons and all that kind of stuff. So it's great to support the channel, because I'm a blacklisted bitch for trying to be out there speaking the truth. He who speaks the truth has few friends. That's an old African proverb. And if you think about that, you know, hundreds of years ago, maybe more, tiny little village in Africa, same shit, different day, kind of energy. Kind of annoyed with this TikTok thing, man. I can't see if I have any viewers. I don't get it. Oh, okay. There's somebody wrote something, so I guess there are people there. Cool. And by the way, TikTok, whatever, whoever, wherever you guys are, questions and subjects, inquiries, I'm down for whatever. Okay, I don't see anything in the chat I need to respond to, but I think what I was getting at earlier, and I kind of got sidetracked with the question, is the the utility of this. You know, when I started this channel, my first video, I was kind of talking about how, you know, if we have a very large demographic of people that have activated their sort of parapsychological capacities of consciousness, and you know, are telepathic and precognitive, and they have excellent pattern recognition, and have mastered objectivity, and completely freed themselves from political, religious, whatever other cultural indoctrination, this would be an unstoppable group, you know, and it would really give us the ace in the sleeve, you know, the hidden hand. What is that line? Hidden hand, protect us from the dead and dying. I'll definitely support when I can. Appreciate you, Andy. But yeah, what I'm saying is, without that, we're not probably going to get around this, or under it, or over it. You know, the obstacle of the totalitarian, technocratic state that is taking root and shaking the ant farm violently and increasingly violently. You know, this is the moment, I believe, where we either hatch from the chrysalis or not, and remain a gloopy glop of glubber. You know what I mean? We have nature on our side, Because one of the things that we have observed in science in the last couple of years is that evolution goes beyond epigenetics even. We have, in particular, an acacia tree that stopped developing the tannins that gets it cut down, and it did this in a couple of seasons and not in 10,000 years or a million years. And what that suggests is that there is some kind of intelligence that has oversight in the evolutionary process and is context aware, you know? And I would put forth that the reemergence of the sacred science of the Magi and the kind of knowledge that the Hermeticists taught, that is exactly the same type of evolutionary adaptation as a response to crisis. You know, so it's almost, not even almost, it is a necessity to have an antagonist. And one of the things that should give us hope and even enthusiasm is that reward is commensurate with resistance, right? I mean, you can say risk as well, and it's equally true. But the resistance, you know, like how heavy your weights are determine how big your muscles get, right? So putting us up against an almost infallible, almost omnipotent, nearly omniscient adversary is exactly the recipe for the greatest possible reward. But I have learned the hard way that even if you have access a higher level of consciousness and you have spirits or demons or whatever the hell it was that was assisting me, and still is, you know, although it's gone a bit light, and I think I can fix that. That's another topic we'll get to in a minute, but you know, despite all those things, if you do not cross your I's and dot your T's, if you do not eliminate fear, which is a horrific dissonance pattern, more or less completely, if you do not locate and annihilate all of your imprints that are counterproductive, you know, all of that magic will avail thee of nothing. Right? Or even worse, because it is extremely painful for me to have to live with the level of missed opportunity that I did because I could not accept the reality of what was happening. In part, I mean, there was more to it, but, and whatever occurs in micro also can occur in macro. So we can't make the mistake of assuming that we have a guarantee of success. And we have to take responsibility. We have to organize, analyze, and actualize. All right, guys, what's up with the chat, man? You guys got to give me some fodder. Give me something to chew on. Kind of wondering if it was even worth it to do the I cannot. It says total viewers 58, but it said that the entire time. So, did it freeze or? Weird. Yeah, man, they really, it looks like maybe there's no one. I can't tell, but it's true. Every platform has got me like deprioritized. I have 58,000 followers or something on TikTok, and I got 0 people in the live stream. Where are these 58,000 people? That's wild. Assholes, you know. They don't want us waking up, kids. They really don't, man. You know, it's not a joke that people that have achieved illumination. And by the way, that's not, I don't believe, a destination. That's like a signpost, you know, and there's plenty levels of it, you know. But after a certain degree, a person does not need to be governed, and they will not tolerate it. So there are a couple of mechanisms that they take advantage of. One of them is cognitive dissonance, and that is why the different the political both aisles have such hypocritical views. They're totally opposing shit. They do that on purpose, because once you have inculcated these opposing viewpoints in a person, if you challenge either side, it results in a fight or flight response. That's why people are so hard-headed about politics as well. You know, and the reason is that these things are integrated with our survival instinct network, you know. So if they are, yeah, that's it. You know, you challenge them, survival instincts are triggered, people just batshit nuts. Another one, let's see. Fear of the unknown. Fear of the unknown is a wild one. You know, this is one of the reasons that I lose patience with the masses sometimes and kind of get hostile towards the Muggle nation. It's really just cowardice. You know, the main reason that people aren't waking up to see the truth in politics or religion is that they're afraid to face the obvious reality. You know, the institutionalized religion version of the sky god clearly isn't real. And it doesn't take much to come to that conclusion. But people are kind of convinced that if they let go of that, they're just going to be adrift with no answers. The irony, of course, is that the only reason they don't have the answers is because of the religion. You know, if they could get that out of their head and then learn to look, they might be able to see. Problem with you is the problem with me. Got two good eyes, but we still don't see. There was another part to that, though. And then the political thing, right? Like, if people are forced to confront the fact that both parties are controlled by the same interests, which couldn't be more provable and easy to see, they have to confront the fact that, like, oh shit, there's nobody there on our side. There's no one to help. You know what I mean? And the fear of that is why people are clinging to it so desperately, no matter how obvious it gets that it's a complete bunch of theater. And really, right now, people that are on the Trump train are so dedicated to it that they can go full totalitarian, and they just, you know, I'll post stuff on Facebook that's absolute proof, and they'll just like react with one of those smiley faces with the tears, you know, laughing emoji. That's crazy, man. That's like, it's like, really? That's your response to like concentration camps and, you know, all this other lunacy. Problematico. Mm-hmm. Yep. However, we do have a hidden hand, you know, to play entrainment, entanglement. If you change your consciousness, you affect the strata of the fucking universe, I think. You know, it's not just other individuals, which is also true. If you elevate your consciousness, you know, everyone that does that is towing the cable, pulling the line a little bit higher. And everything's relative, so you're never going to have utopia, but you can raise the floor, right? So, you know, there's that aspect of it. And then entanglement also is quite the weapon for us. And if it's true that the universe is made of consciousness, which is an increasingly popular idea with mainstream physicists and whatnot, then our capacity to mold our experience and potentially even shape the universe is much greater than we probably even can imagine. When I think about when I was at the height of my powers, I really wish I could answer what exactly how this shit happens. It's a really difficult thing to explain. For example, one of the early major synchronicities was this ruler that had two 11s printed on it, and one of the 11s was where the number 23 is supposed to be, which is a number associated with synchronicity as well. And so my girlfriend had asked me about the number 11 and what it signifies and whatnot. And so we were talking about it, and she kept interrupting me with grunts and shit. And I was like, what is wrong with you? And she's like, I don't know. And then she just stopped, and she's like, what the hell? And there were two 11s printed on the ruler, and we had never heard about 1111. I'd never heard of this concept before. So my issue with that is, things don't really happen in impossible ways. There's some sort of mechanistic way that things occur. That ruler didn't just transform or something, But then in order to explain it, you'd have to say that the people that, the company that printed the ruler printed, 100,000 of these things or more, and they didn't notice. And the thing is, it's not like they painted the numbers on. It's a mold. So you're telling me they made the mold wrong and no one noticed, and they, you know what I mean? It's things like that are, they suggest, and actually this is what I asked AI about this, because if the Copenhagen interpretation is right, if the future exists as a wave that doesn't collapse until consciousness arrives, then things are constantly just reformulating. And our consciousness would potentially be able to cause some kind of glitch in the matrix like that. I had another bit. Oh, and there actually is evidence that it works that way. I'm not totally able to explain this, but I heard a physicist talking about how, if this cup here is not the same cup in in a billionth of a second, every single particle blinks out of existence and it sort of reformulates, and how it knows to make the shape of a cup. He didn't know, but I think I do. We are told that information is not lost at the quantum level. So that 0-point field, or, what people call it, the Akashic record, that's what tells it how to still be a cup. But the point is that is a possibility, and I had a lot of synchronicities like that where it just almost didn't make any sense that it could physically happen. There was another instance where I was working with a guy who I had just eaten bear stroganoff with at his house, and my girlfriend calls and she's like, hey, there are 3 bear in a tree in the front yard. And I was like, okay, cool. And I had her on speakerphone so the guy heard it, and I got off and I pulled the stuffing, the insulation, out of the awning we were tearing down, and 3 bear claws fell out from behind it and landed on the deck. And I was like, those have got to be parrot talons or something. And the guy comes over and he's like, no, dude, those are bear claws. Yeah, you just ate bear. I just shot one. There's definitely bear claws. And then, the mechanistic physical world explanation for that is probably that there were Native Americans, a lot of them in that area, and it was like a blessing or something to, put them in the structure of the house. And I just happened to be right there at that moment, Still though, these things really make me wonder what the extent of our power to influence our experiences. way back in the day when I was still physically addicted to Vicodin too, I ran out and I was like traveling and I was like, uh-oh, you know, because I was going to get sick and I wouldn't be able to drive. And I said to my girlfriend, like, I need to find some Vicodin. And there was a truck parked like 100 feet away in the middle of nowhere in Garberville, California. And we go up and the guy's like, want to buy a motorcycle? And I was like, no. And he's like, how about some Vicodin? We're in the middle of nowhere. Like, why would that happen? You know, point being, these things are not absolute proof, but they certainly are indicative of the possibility that we're really able to influence the configuration of reality. And if you guys know the rest of my story, you know, what ended up happening with Bob Weir, for example, and how that all happened more specifically, you know, the evidence that I mean, I hesitate to call it evidence because I didn't videotape the whole thing. You have to take my word for it. You know what I mean? But taking the story at face value, at least, it's pretty overwhelming evidence that we have capacities that go well beyond the conventional. And if we are to surmount current challenges, we had better figure out how to fucking deploy them. You know? At the moment, that's something that I'm heavily focused on, like trying to get back to that place of fluid exchange with that higher self and those manifestation capacities. And basically, in short, because I missed the grand finale, not realizing that it was happening, I kind of felt burned by the whole experience, and my confidence was a little bit pretty badly shaken. You know, I knew that there was validity to it because, I mean, you guys have heard some of it. There's just, you can't get around it. But I could not get over that last like bit of doubt until this last little piece clicked, right? So now I'm back in a place where I don't have that obstruction. And my prediction is that things finna get interesting. One of the complications, though, is that what I've noticed is that you have to be very, very specific about your intention. It can't be this vague, like, thing. You know, I knew where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do, who was going to be involved, and, you know, I laid these things out exactly as they happened. You know what I mean? So that I think that's really important. Also, like, I manifested a wife at one point that, you know, I gave an age, hair color, build, and the criteria that her family was wealthy and willing to throw money at my music project, right? And that all happened. Like, we were engaged within like 3 weeks. I hadn't even met her yet. It was ridiculous, you know. And about a year later, her mom was like, well, do you want money for your music? But I didn't specify that she was like trustworthy and that we were actually in love, and you know what I mean? So she turned out to be pretty treacherous and, you know, just not good. So just something to note, that when you're on this manifestation mission, cross your eyes and dot your T's, or dot your I's and cross your T's, whatever. All right, chat. How you guys doing? What's going on? Oh, I appreciate you saying that it's good content. I might have to chew some coca too, speaking of. I know that's kind of annoying, but it's late and I am old, and it seems like this stream needs to continue. By the way, you guys, if you haven't hit the like button, share, subscribe, become a patron, or send money to PayPal or Zelle or whatever, so that we can continue to justify hours spent trying to pry some third eyes. You know, it gets on my nerves, though, you guys, that it's inevitably preaching to the choir, but that's another aspect of this that I think I've had to work out over the years. When I was younger, I had this kind of like utopian belief, like the young naive, like we're going to turn on the world and, everyone's going to awaken and shit's going to be chill as fuck. And it looked like that was happening too, up until about like 2000, like just past, I don't know, 2010 or something. You started to notice that maybe it had the wave had crested and broken and was going back out to sea. But yeah, that's what I used to think. And now I realize that that's not the plan. It just isn't the plan. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. It doesn't mean that it's impossible to wake up the muggles, but it's not likely. There's this verse in the Bible says something like, "Let he who is dirty be dirty still, and him who is." I think that's where we're at. People have pretty much drawn their lines. Pretty much the dice is cast. So at this point, it's really about just like empowering and helping the people that are already on the bus, as they said in the 60s, going further. And also, I've realized the hard way, that actually confronting people and trying to verbally convince them of anything is generally a fool's errand. The inculcation, the integration of the opposing viewpoints that result in that fight or flight reaction when you challenge either of them has pretty much rendered people unreachable in that way. But if my theories about entanglement and entrainment apply to consciousness, I don't see why they wouldn't. When we take care of each other and we elevate ourselves, people at a lower, I don't like how condescending that sounds, but I guess it's fair. You know what I mean? They have no choice but to be elevated themselves. It's natural law, and I've talked about this before, but I guess it bears repeating that that's really what Congress with a Demon is about in the Western occult tradition. It's about a couple things. But the reason the magician has so much confidence, and when he says God compels you, what that actually means is a law of the universe called entrainment dictates that things at a lower vibration have to synchronize with a higher. Therefore, the demon is constrained to my will. This is why dogs listen to us. Right? The other thing, and I think this is of extreme value for most of us who have a hole in our soul from, there's a hole in the soul where the light comes through. It's true that energy cannot be destroyed. It can only be transformed. So if you have a bunch of damage, you got a bunch of darkness, you're not finna get rid of it. Exactly. But it can be dealt with. And how you deal with it is transmutation. Earlier we were talking about Grateful Dead music and how they kind of imitated the macrocosm. Did I just cause an issue putting that bowl there? No, I didn't. Sorry. What was I saying? Yeah, they in terms of like rhythm and stuff, they would try to imitate like physics. If the bass drum got kicked really hard, then the bass note would fly really fast, slide away, with the same momentum, and that sort of thing. And also dissolving the structure of the music in order to bring a new structure out, solve it, coagula, all that, right? So that's what we're trying to do. The Adam Cadman, the universal man, the macroprosopis, the universe at large, we embody its processes. We are bodied by its processes, so the likelihood is that the universe is cyclical, like everything else. And it began basically as light. And if Penrose is correct, what happens is all the particles eventually slam into an antiparticle, and there's nothing but photons left, so it returns to the light. And then the universe sort of collapses back in on itself once everything is dissolved and there's nothing to maintain the, keep it puffed out, I guess. And the singularity occurs again. Right? So that process of transmutation is the fundamental process of the universe, is what I was getting at there. And so it is for us, right? And opposites also create each other, right? You use coal, that's like basically death, to create energy to do stuff, nearly everything we do is motivated by hate or fear, really. Everything we do out of love, and it's an overgeneralization, but what I'm saying is when we take it upon ourselves to try to change something that we don't like in the world, we hate that thing or we fear it and we want to get rid of it, So the opposites generate each other. Life creates death. Death fertilizes shit and new life, you guys know all that. But so the thing is, with our damage, we can never get rid of it. And the process of transmutation isn't really as simple as converting energy just by thinking about it. That's something you can kind of do. But it occurred to me today to describe it like a structure, right? Or an even better way is like when a magician does shit that looks like magic, he's really applying natural law in a way that makes it appear that he's transcending natural law. And he kind of is, but he's using those laws to effectively rise above them, right? And your traumas, your damage is your limitations. Just as those natural laws that the magician is using for his work are his limitations. Opposites generate each other. And so rather than trying to discard all of that trauma, you need to learn to use it to change its nature. Earlier we were talking about demons again, and the Congress with the demon. The magician draws a circle that is his microcosm, and the demon is in a triangle outside of that microcosm. And let's say it is the demon of greed. He's not trying to kill the demon because he can't. It's energy. You can't destroy it. But you can transmute greed into, let's see, I was trying to find the word to qualify ambition. So it's, philanthropic ambition. Right? So that's kind of the method. But even more so, I'm trying to figure out how to describe this. Like think of like the trauma as like a bunch of like bars, and you're climbing up them and learning to stand and balance on them. That wasn't great either, but you guys know what I mean. You will use these things in the same way that the magician uses what should be limitations imposed by natural law, and he transmutes those limitations into expansion, capacity. Hold on. Stupid. The chat in Streamlabs, like you can't really see the whole thing, so it's like just partial sentences. So I gotta go in here and look. If someone had an abusive mother, should they just live with the fact that things never seem to go their way? Like everyone seems to get very near to helping and then just stops. Okay. I had an extremely abusive mother. She didn't mean to, fundamentally was a good person, but in another sense, she was a psychopathic narcissist. And she really stole my destiny, really, to a large extent. There were a couple of things, like my dad didn't help much, but for example, I had a thing of like setting up the most impossible successes and then just refusing to go through with it. The biggest one being I wanted to play with the surviving members of the Grateful Dead, and I went to Marin with instructions to play, and one of them somebody that knew one of them would introduce me and something would happen. And the wife called me and said, someone important's coming to the jam session this week. You have to be there. I didn't go. It was Bob Weir from the Grateful Dead that had heard a recording and come down to hire me or something, And the reason I didn't go, the half of it, my dad had another part, but my mom, I learned to play Eruption by Van Halen when I was like 13 or something, after having a guitar for like 6 months. And my stepfather was like, holy shit, Annette, you gotta come see this. Your kid is a prodigy or something. And she comes in and I'd like do it. And she's like, so, and she walks out. And she did that with everything. So what eventually happened is that for me, winning or losing was the same thing. And either way, it was bad. So limbo, where I'm like not doing either, was the safe place. And you can't imagine how much I hate that. Like, I very well may have been a rock star out there changing the world for the last 13 years if it wasn't for that imprint, It's really fucked up. So you can't let her do that to you. And what you're describing to me, where you think you see this thing that everyone's doing and you intuitively relate it to your mom, right? Because there's an imprint there. That's why you're perceiving it that way. The thing is, it's probably not that way. It's just that you have an imprint that causes you to perceive it that way, And so the process of metaprogramming, basically like a really simple metaprogramming for idiots, the easy abridged version, is that you have to start like tracing back aberrative behaviors to the earliest thing you can remember, right? So when I realized that I self-sabotaged all the time, I was like, why? And I went back to, every memory I could that connect to it until I came to being like 4 or 5 years old, and I wanted ice cream, and my mom didn't have enough money for like a gas station ice cream, and she was pissed about that, so she screamed in my face, like veins bulging out, blood red face, like, you don't deserve ice cream, with like the nastiest tone she could fucking muster, and I was like, holy shit, I don't think I deserve anything. So that broke the spell to a large extent. Not enough, though, you really, depending on the level of the damage and also how early the imprint is, you really have to do a lot of work. The best method, of which I am aware for doing this very rapidly, is a moderate dose of like 60 to 100 micrograms of lysergic acid diethylamide tartrate 25, because it is, of all of the classical psychedelics, the one that catalyzes neurogenesis and promotes neuroplasticity the most. So it's the best one for this. Plus, it doesn't have a lot of body stuff that can be distracting when you're trying to do this kind of work. And pranayama with the fourfold breath. 4 is the number of stability, right? When you cast a circle and then that's your universe, and then you make the 4 directions, that's the stability. They're starting to build it. So you use that stability in your breath, because the breath is the symbol of the life force. And to control the breath is to control your life. And so you're breathing in for a 4 count, holding for a 4 count, blowing out for a 4 count, distending for a 4 count, and making a cube in your breath that you can stand on. And as you're doing this, you think about like the positive imprint while you're flooding the brain with oxygen. And then while you're holding it in, while you're, inundating, so that the brain has fuel for this enhanced neurogenesis and neuroplasticity, right? The oxygen and you have more of it going on, so you got to feed it more, right? And then keeping the breath, and then as you exhale, you feel the shit that you need to let go of. Not necessarily thinking specifically. You can do that too, but I think it's more important to like feel associated feelings and expel them, and you have to expel the breath all the way down until you're, to the bottom of your diaphragm has squished everything out, right? And I quit a 20-year smoking habit in about an hour, using that to the extent that I forgot that I smoked the next day until I found my pouch of tobacco in my pocket. So, you got to find these imprints, and then you have to do what I just described. That's the best thing you're possibly going to fucking be able to do, And another thing you can do is load your brain with colloidal gold. It's extremely important, the smallest angstrom possible, and high parts per million, like 3 to 500. Atlantis Alchemy, I think, is a company that has like laser, it's really tiny, and high parts per million. And do the same process, but rather than trying to reprogram an imprint, just finding a habit you need to create. You know what I mean? You don't have to just use this to dissolve influences. You can create new habits with this. I am doing a retreat in July, too, by the way, if you would like to come and hang out. It'll be the entire month of July, and it starts July 11th, actually. July 11th to August 11th. And it's going to be very near the peak of the solar storms, so at the end, I guess, or near the end of the event, we're in the Sacred Valley, so we're going to go up high, like really, really high as we can safely. Probably to an Incan holy site if I can find one that's also up really high. Ollantaytambo's too busy. But maybe Vilcabamba. It's kind of like way out in the middle of nowhere and fairly well deserted. And we're going to load our brains with colloidal silver and drink San Pedro, which is a medicine of the light, and talk to the sun, basically. I don't know if it's really talking to the sun. I think it probably is, but the idea, at least, is that when there are solar storms peaking, it represents an opportunity for us to sort of communicate, I guess, or integrate with the universal mind to a higher degree than is normally available to us. The last round of the Phoenix process for me in 2011 was a peak, and I found out I was actually born at the peak of a solar cycle, so my life goes in these perfect in union with the solar cycles. And I was also 33 at the end of the last Phoenix process, which is also not a coincidence. And so, the medicine of the light, high elevation, lots of colloidal gold, and we'll have a ceremony up there. Before that, we'll also have serpent ayahuasca, which is black, yellow, and red with chacruna, chalipanga, and acacia. The reason for that is that the profile of all of these different plants, they have different benefits and effects. And so having the entourage of all of them has made an incredibly powerful brew. It covers all the bases, basically. and lots of other things. We're going to go to ruins, and there's around our property, there's rivers on the property and ruins around, and the neighbors all just speak Quechua. A lot of them. We went to a store in town a little while back, and we were like, "Necesitamos pollo," and the lady's like, "What?" Obviously not in English or Quechua. She didn't know what the hell. I was like, "Pollo?" Wow. Like, really, man? You guys don't even speak Spanish at all up here? It's wild, It's kind of like getting teleported back into that like ancient Incan civilization or something, I mean, the houses are sort of modern. Our little enclave is, but you see little Quechua people, 70 years old, mouthful of coca, carrying fucking 50 pounds of potatoes up and down the hill. I even feel bad, like I'll be out on my deck just chilling, and I'll see some old lady carrying like a 50-pound sack of potatoes up a hill, and I'm like, damn, man, I feel like I should go help her, but that's what they do, and they're hunched up and stuff. I mean, it doesn't look like their bodies really handle it necessarily super well. It wears them down, but that's life for them. And while we're on the subject, people talk about eradicating poverty from places like this, and I'm not so sure that that's necessary, because they're poor, but they're happy and chill, and they're sovereign. They grow their potatoes and their choclo, and they raise pigs and cows and sheep and alpacas, and they eat them. They're always happy and friendly and chill. Like, I don't have to lock my doors, and like they treat us like neighbors, whereas a lot of other places in South America that we've been, they definitely treat us like foreigners, and even it was dangerous with some of the indigenous. Like, if we were staying with one clan, sometimes the other clan would get jealous, and then there could be like real serious problems, because jungle law is whatever people decide that it is. Anyways, let me check out the chat again. People say LAD is not mind-bendingly intense. I don't know who you're talking to, dude. LAD? I don't know if that's different than what I'm... when you say LAD to me, I think lysergic acid... let's see, LSD is lysergic acid diethylamide. The other one is lysergic acid... just a mide, maybe? Anyways, it's in Morning Glories, and I'm pretty sure that's what you're talking about. And it depends on the dose. The problem with it is it's very difficult to dose correctly, and it has way more physical, like, body load, and can cause headaches and nausea and stuff. So I don't really recommend it unless you're talking about something else. And with the LAD, you might be. Sorry, guys, I'm just checking the chat for questions and stuff I might have missed. No, I said 60 micrograms, not 600. 60 micrograms. 60 micrograms. You want it to be manageable. Have you done this LSD pranayama method for re-imprinting? Yeah, I have. Maybe you asked that question before I told the story. The dosage was 60 mics, not 100. Okay. Yeah, you guys, the chat is open to questions and whatnot, subjects, if there's anything burning a hole in your brain that you would like my input on. Okay, the TikTok chat's filling up. That's crazy. Cool. First time on TikTok live, you guys. Say hi in the chat. Don't forget about the Cash App. Gotta make it overflow. Choke my Cash App, you guys. Where were we with all of this craziness? We got onto the subject of psychedelics. Oh, earlier I think I started talking about how the mystery. I did do this. The mystery always presents itself in a way that casts light or casts doubt upon it, right? So the association that people were making with telepathy and psychedelics, like people hear that and they're like, no, you were just high. There's no telepathy. And I think that actually caused me a tremendous amount of doubt, because when all of this really intense sort of precognitions and synchronicities, and I wasn't taking a lot of psychedelics, but I knew that I had taken psychedelics, and I was thinking, partly like, did I just break my fucking brain? Like, you know what I mean? And then I started to read, like Daniel Pinchbeck said that after he smoked DMT, he had an occult hangover where all the same type of stuff was happening for weeks afterwards. And then I noticed also that if I had DMT or something, that these experiences would increase. And I think the answer to that, why that happens, part of the reason, the telepathy is because Huxley was right. I think that the filter in our nervous system, the reducing valve, there are filters down to an extent, and so we're receptive to other minds, other signals, than our own. I mean, if you think about it, it doesn't make any sense to not believe in telepathy, because your brain is basically reading its own waves, and why would it not know how to process information from other brains? There's just no reason to not think that would happen. But another reason that it happens, like with the synchronicities and precognitions and whatnot, the precognitions are probably due to enhanced pattern recognition, which is something that psychedelics do for us. And then the synchronicities are expressions of different orders of symmetry, right? And so basically, when you bring your conscious and subconscious mind into symmetry, more into symmetry, there's a correspondence between your internal and external experience. How that can be, I'm not exactly sure. I know the answer has something to do. It's structural. It's not woo. It's symmetry that just penetrates everything, and something that we don't really think about in the Western ontological model is that there are completely different orders of symmetry. There's symmetries of form and function, for example. You see this in expressions of sex, the behavior and the general disposition of the sexes, and the way that their genitalia are formed and function, and these symmetries extend even beyond that. So anyways, that's just kind of a piece of the puzzle that I should have mentioned when we were actually talking about it, that I just realized I forgot to wrap up that. Have you seen the end of Oblivion? I don't even know what you're talking about. Cocoa without taking a Kintu? Oh, it's already blended in there. We just blend it up, make a paste, and it already has the activator in it. It's a research chemical? Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I don't know anything about LAD then. For those of you that are just popping on, we are in the AMA phase of this discussion. So pop your questions and topics into the chat, and I'll be happy to do my best to offer something of substance and value. We better get it together, y'all. I'm not even playing about that. This is it. You know what I mean? We are crisis, and it's not even true. This is a lie that someone made up about the Chinese characters, but it still is. It's true, but it's not true about the Chinese characters. What is it? Crisis and crisis and opportunity or something. God damn it. You know what I mean? The existential crisis that we're facing directly correlates with the opportunity that's being presented in the moment. And the magician has the inertia of the universe to assist him. So, form it takes is ours to choose to an extent that is quite surprising, I think. But we have to have enthusiasm, energized enthusiasm. This is where the current, we're working with electromagnetism that is part of our sidereal body, right? It's an integration that we have, this electromagnetism in our will. But you can't have interference and dissonance patterns in the form of fear or excessive doubt. Doubt makes an excellent mistress, but a nagging wife. You can dance and drink all night with faith, and you will find a corpse in your arms upon awakening. Drink and dance all night with doubt, and you will find her a virgin in the morning. Aleister Crowley, The Book of Lies. But it's true. This is the balance that so few people seem to be able to strike in like the spiritual community. They're either just woo to the point where there's wind whistling through their ears, and it's just like, the people see things in black and white too much. Like, I'm a Republican or a Democrat, or I'm a Christian or an atheist, or I'm gay or straight, or whatever, Tell me I just lost my train of thought. That was important. Oh, yeah. So either choosing, I just believe in everything that is supposedly, any like New Age book says or whatever, or I'm an abject materialist and I got no space for this shit no matter what. I don't know why it's so difficult for people. But walking with knowledge wisely means that you are tempering your open-mindedness with skepticism. I think people are afraid that if they do that, they won't be left with anything. If you are too analytical or intellectual, and I think some of that is engineered by the overlords. They don't want you, If a person realizes they can be both intellectual and scientific and also spiritual, that's a dangerous motherfucker to the status quo. That's a problematic person, which is ridiculous. Those are the people we need. We need entire nations, entire world full of them. But that's not what they want or need. I can dig it. Thank you, Andy. That was nice. Toxic spiritual positivity. I hate that shit too. Who do you perceive as the they that have hidden the greatest truth from us? That is a complicated question. And the reality is, I don't really know, and I don't think they do either, really. I kind of know. There's a man that rides a white horse in France. That's been a problem for a few hundred years. But seriously, folks, all the way back in Egypt, when the pharaohs realized that the mysteries genuinely illuminated people, the ancient mystery schools, the cult of Isis and whatnot, they created monotheism and they banned the mysteries. Luckily, right around that time, Pythagoras and I think Empedocles had come from Greece to different schools. And so they were initiated and they took this knowledge to Greece. And in the 3rd century, the Roman consulate figured out that it illuminated people and that was a problem, and so they banned them again. And Aristotle literally said, without the knowledge of the mysteries, humanity will be lost. And look at us, So it kind of went underground. There are a couple of consequences of this that are sort of related, though. The archons of the Gnostics are not spirits. They are people, and they were magistrates. It was the title of a certain type of magistrate in Rome. And these archons were charged with penetrating the mysteries and stealing the secrets and sabotaging them also. So that's where the legend of the Archon intervening when mankind is about to get sacred knowledge. It was cops, basically. It was like CIA agents. Yeah. And so that's kind of where we get this thing where a lot of Freemasonic lodges are like the establishment. Because they figured out that they needed to control who knew what. And so that's part of it. The question, if you're just tuning in, is who are they? So those are who they are. Israel clearly has way more power than makes any sense. I'm not sure exactly how they pulled that off or what's going on there, but it's clearly true. Rockefellers and Rothschilds. I mean, it doesn't really matter specifically. Fucking hell, I'm choking on coca. Sorry, guys. It's the establishment in general. But it's a crazy thought, and it's a true thought. And I can prove it, too. Where's that book? Oh, it must not be handy. I could have sworn it was like right under my chair, but it's not. It's a Masonic handbook that goes through all the degrees written by a 33rd degree Mason, and it's all the stuff that I talk about and how it needs to get out to the world in order to get rid of all the assholes that, you're asking who they are, those guys. So there are people on both sides of the coin that know this stuff, and it is the number one threat to the status quo, to the overlords, that people will figure out what they are, basically what they really are, what the universe really is, what it's for, what it does. When the genie escapes the lab, it's a new world. I don't understand really what motivates them. God damn it. When that happens, you can't wash it down because it's like a leaf in my windpipe. That's the problem with the paste. Like, you can breathe in. Anyways, necessity, right? Reward is exactly correlated with resistance. So without tremendous pressure, you have no diamonds. And in a diamond mine, you have like 99.9999% coal. And when you look around the world, you see the same thing. You see a tremendous amount of pressure creating a couple of scattered diamonds, in a big mass of carbon. So that's one of the funny things about illumination. You're not really like sure that it's something that needs to be fixed, even in a way, because it is an expression of the formula of creation, the way things are structured. Even the economies, when you look at a pyramid and you're like, why is the 1% at the top? Well, how broad must your base be if you're to surpass the stars? The pyramid is the most stable shape. So that's why society is built like that. That's why economies are built like that. And it's what the universe is doing. It's like the energy in the universe is telling a story. But the form of that story is entirely dictated by the laws of creation. So, when I heard some mystic once say that there's not a grain of sand in the universe that's out of place, that can't be untrue. And, this kind of knowledge can give you a bad existential crisis because you're like, well, then what the fuck is the point? You can't change anyone's mind. We're not even supposed to fix the world. Like, what? The thing is, like I said earlier, you can raise the floor. you know. And one of the techniques of any type of shamanism, which really Hermeticism is a really sophisticated form of shamanism, you're learning to read the allegories of the book of nature. Right? So when you see an evolution, and this is one of the biggest evidences of teleology that they ignore deliberately, the mutations are almost always, there are bad mutations occasionally, but they're the exception, not the rule. They're improvements. And so, you know, if we accept that the universe is cyclical and that there is a general trajectory that is upwards, one way to think about that is that if there are more evolved civilizations, the consciousness is in training with that. If there is a multiverse and there are higher expressions of this universe, this one's in training with that. There is a prima mobile. There is an attractor in hyperspace. As Terence McKenna would have said, drawing everything upwards. Man. So it all stays in a state of balance. So there are equal parts of opposites, but you can raise the fucking floor. Well, you said, man, I'm going to die here. If people live in a constant state of fear, you can exploit them however you like. Yes, but the thing is, one of the reasons that opportunity coagulated is that people naturally kind of live in a state of fear. You know, and so it was very easy for the first guy that was just a little bit smarter than everyone else to just tell them they're safe if they do what the fuck he says. You know, that's basically where tribes and kingdoms and shit came from. Somebody was just like, huh, these motherfuckers are scared ass, you know. Just do what I tell you and everybody will be fine. They're still doing it. You know, they did it with the pandemic. Trump does it all the time. You know, brown people are going to eat your cats and fucking, you know, give your kids sex changes. I mean, it's not really Trump either. You know, don't doubt that everything that dude does is dictated to him from on high somewhere. You know, he's not. People think he's immune to that because he's a billionaire. Dumb motherfucker. How do you think he became a billionaire? You know what I mean? Like, these same people generally are conspiracy theorists that believe that in order to get into the billionaire club, you have to do some fucked up shit so they have something to hang over your head. But then yet they're like, oh, but Trump is somehow different. You know, it's like, give me a break, man. Selective perception, like, on a level that is like hard to believe people are capable of. If I hadn't done it myself in the past, I don't know if I could even believe it, even if I was looking at it, even though I'm looking at it. You know, it's silly shit, man. Since he's taken office, people were expecting, you know, Trumpers were expecting like all this freedom and censorship to go away, and it's increased on X. Compliance with government requests for censorship has increased by 21% since the pandemic. I've been shadow banned on X for criticizing Elon Musk. You know, I mean, it was all a lie. It was all a trick. And the whole totalitarian thing that I predicted 6 years ago, you guys go back, watch my old political videos. I described everything that's happening. And you know why? You don't have to be a fucking prophet. The trajectory has been the same for decades, man. You know, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue. It doesn't make a fucking difference. And it's not making a difference now. It's just it's just getting worse. Increase in ignorance, increase in division. Lower and middle classes getting strangled out. You know. It's what's good in the hood. In este momento. Yup. But you know what, you guys? There's a pendulum. And and it's guaranteed to swing. This always happens. And look over history, and the further it swings one way, the further it swings the other way. In some ways that's good, in some ways it's very bad. The thing is, the big swings are more exciting. If it were to remain more stationary, it would be kind of boring. You know, people, mystics of certain types, believe that this happens with individuals, you know, and even across lifetimes. That's why most people choose the middle way. You know, they just want to be normal and just eat, sleep, shit, occasionally fuck, go to work, nothing more. Not think too hard, just, you know. Because if you do this, what goes up must come down. The highs are going to be balanced with lows. You know, so it's like choose your battle. Choose your adventure. If you want to experience from the highest vantage points, risking hell of a fall. The thing is, if it gets enough momentum, it can start doing that in one direction. That wouldn't be forever, but long enough. The other thing is the solvet coagula process, right? Like, the reason that people generally go insane a little bit, it's not really insanity. It's similar to a psychotic break, though. Whether you call it chapel perilous or the phoenix process or the shamanic initiation, you know, there's a sort of breaking down of the old structure, the old ego, you know. And it's because you have to have space for things to reconfigure, right? So the mind breaks down, society breaks down, and the pieces separate. You could think of it, right? But if they come too far apart, when they collapse back in together, there's too much force and the system is destroyed. So we just have to hope that that's not in the cards. 30 people. Jeez, guys. So for those of you that are just piling in here, we're in the AMA modality. So please hit the like button, share, subscribe. Consider supporting our demonetized channel, because otherwise I do this for nothing. And that's not cool. Those of you on TikTok can find my Cash App in my description. And so we have been talking about knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel, the potential collapse or reformulation of society, which is, it's one or the other. There is no middle ground, and it may be that it has to completely collapse before it can reconfigure. And that's a pain in the ass that I'm not trying to deal with. But it's probably not going to stop it from happening if that's what it's finna choose. So, you know, in lieu of that, though, we are all trying to figure out how to metaprogram and engineer ourselves in order to be the greatest possible asset in the event that this is a transition and not a termination. It's iffy. It's iffy. We haven't discussed the possibility of alien or interdimensional intervention. And the thing about interdimensional intervention is that it doesn't even require that interdimensional beings objectively exist. I'm pretty sure the universal mind can formulate these things as necessity demands, right? So either way, though, you know, that's one thing that's occurred to me, that There, according to the Dirac equation, there's between 100 billion or 300 billion and 100 trillion civilizations in the universe that have had technology for 10,000 years. We are probably 5 years out from immortality because we have accomplished cell age reversal in eyeball cells in a laboratory a few years ago now, and also Michael Levin's work with morphology and electromagnetic fields. He also thinks that reversal of any kind of damage, death, whatever, is like pretty close. We have achieved teleportation of information, which is a step away from being able to do it with, because it uses entanglement, it wouldn't kill you. So to do it with a living thing is definitely on the table, because it's, entanglement is literally instantaneous. So if we have gotten to that point with 75 years of, computer technology, roughly 10,000 years, like, we can't even imagine what that would look like. They have the UAP videos, or not videos, well, they're videos too, but the testimony in Congress, they were saying that they move so fast that they can't be moving, because there's nothing that could withstand the G-forces, even if the fucking aliens or whatever in there are made of lead. And also the structure itself, like, there's just nothing, you couldn't do it. So they were saying, like, they basically are already everywhere, and they just choose a perspective and they're in that place, but they were always already everywhere somehow. That would be facilitated by the holography of the universe, and that is supported by evidence gathered from the way that information is dispersed at the event horizon of a black hole. Something about this is being framed as proof of the holographic nature of the universe, and that would explain how these UAPs move. So anyways, what I was getting at with that is that without a doubt, without a fucking shadow of a doubt, there are immortal beings that can teleport anywhere instantly all over the fucking universe. So the question of, like, whether they're here or not is stupid. You know what I mean? It's completely stupid. There's no chance that they're not, or that they haven't been, because it's like a statistical probability that is beyond certain that they exist. We're giving off all kinds of unnatural signals, like us with 75 years of technology can detect fucking gases on the other end of the universe or whatever that indicate that there has to be biological life on a planet. You know what I mean? Like, people still going like, well, there might be. What the fuck? What do you mean? What do you mean? Especially, it's funny that the Muggle types that claim to be rooted in evidence, they're like, well, I'm an evidence-based atheist fucking, it's like, okay, well, then there's an interdimensional being standing behind you with almost like 100% certainty, bitch. Like, you want to talk about math and stuff, like, that's what's up. Oh my gosh. I appreciate how you share your perspectives. Terrence McKenna, Ram Dass, too. Cheers. Terrence McKenna is actually the first person I exchanged an email with, which is kind of crazy, in 1998. I didn't know what email was, and I wanted to go to an event he was having. So I was like 17, and I asked I just mentioned it to my friend. He was rich, so he knew what the internet was. And and they had a great room in their house, which I'd never even heard of. I would call it a living room, but it was like so gigantic that I guess you have to call it a great room. And he's like, why don't you email him? And I'm like, what the fuck is email? So he brought me in the room and set up an email account, and I emailed him, and he answered me. I couldn't believe it. His mom came out of the great room like the next day, and she's like, "You have an email from somebody and just says TM." I was like, "What? Crazy." And he was really cool too. I was basically, I grew up with no indoor plumbing, bullet holes, in the windows when we moved in, and the feces and concrete in our well water, like no running water in the house. No, I had an outhouse. You go outside to go to the bathroom, and there'd be big ass snakes and spiders and bees and shit in there all the time. The neighbors were inbred that fed fucking gunpowder to their dogs and to make them mean, and then they'd get loose, and you'd be fighting pit bulls and stuff to get home from the school bus, and babysitters shooting at people, beating their brother with lead pipe. I mean, it was like off the charts, fucking white trash lunacy. And so I didn't know anything about traveling. I didn't have a visa or even know what they were, passport. I didn't know what they were even, or how to buy a plane ticket. I never had a bank account, but I wanted to go to Mexico and go to this thing, So I emailed him, and I was like, I don't know if I can afford the $2,500 either, even if I can figure out. And he's like, if you can just get here, you don't have to pay. I was like, wow, that's really nice of you. I really wish I'd gone, because he died 2 or 3 years after that, I think. I fucked up like that a couple times. Somebody tried to give me free tickets to see one of the last Grateful Dead concerts, and I was like, fuck those hippies. I'm not, I listened to like Bone Thugs and Harmony and Megadeth and stuff. I was not interested in that. It's a damn shame. I could have gone for free, and just at least have been able to mark that off on my bucket list or whatever. The bornless ritual. Well, the structure of it, the oath is basically just the Hermetic Lord's Prayer. Thee I invoke, the bornless one, thee that didst create the earth and the heavens, thee that didst create the night and the day, thee that didst create the darkness and the light. I'm starting to get a little bit tired, so I might not be able to, even though I do this like every day, it's not immediately coming to mind. Holy art thou, Lord of the universe. Holy art thou, the vast and the mighty one. Holy art thou, the who hath created the light and the dark. Or wait, whom nature hath not formed. Who hath created the light and the darkness. Bestow upon me thy aid, that I may attain to my highest purpose. Or there's different ways of phrasing the last line. But something that is really important about that ritual, the Kabbalistic cross, you say that, right? Invoke the Most High. But then when you say Ata, Vegebura, Vegedula, Malkut, Leolam, Amen, I sometimes add Tiferet, because harmony and the sun and everything. Yours is the power, the glory of the kingdom forever and ever, amen. Yours. You are identifying yourself with God. And so Liber Samic, the bornless ritual, is basically the same thing, but you are just like an identification with the holy guardian angel rather than necessarily like the Most High. So it's just a little bit of a tweak. It's also important if you're going to do these kind of rituals. I've noticed a lot of people Don't bother to find out what all these Greek words and abbreviations and whatnot actually represent. And that's, I doubt anyone watching this stream is under that bad of a misconception about things. But just in case, it's not about words. People think that like going through the motions of ritual is going to do something. Because if you're a Catholic or something, that's what it is. But that's not, you need to know what you're doing and why you're doing it. Like the ritual that I promote the most, because I think it's just the most important and the best designed, and it's the most basic, the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. One of the advantages of magical systems is that you're able to compress information into smaller symbols, right? And you're training the mind to process information on multiple reels all the time when you do that kind of ritual work. So, when you have the angel, you have the direction and the symbolism, the things that are connected to those things, and then also the element and the God name. And you have, there's huge web of, not correlations, what's the word? Sorry guys, my brain's starting to melt. I'm probably gonna have to wrap it up soon. The word 777 is like a book full of them, where a herb is connected to a color, is connected to a, the hell, why can't I remember the goddamn word for this? Anyways, you guys know what I mean. You have this big web of things that are connected to the fucking central thing, and correspondences, and then you have 4 webs, and you crush that all into one thing, and then that's how you're consolidating power, basically. So, in order to get the most from the ritual is what I'm saying. You have to have conscious awareness of what all those associations and correspondences are in order to really get the proper effect from the ritual. The thing is, obviously, like, once you have inculcated all that shit and it's in there, you don't have to like think about it every time. That's kind of the point, right? And then you, as I was saying, you start processing everything that way, including events. You see the message, although the adeptus, or what, how is it? The master of the temple sees a slug, and he asks, "What is this message from very God of very God to my very soul?" The adept sees the slug, and he says, "How can I use this?" I read that in a big stack of papers that I had in the passenger seat when I was traveling in California once, in the Muir Forest, where the Ewok scenes were filmed, actually. And I opened my door and started to step out, and there was like a 12-inch banana slug right next to the car. And I thought, I'm not going to use this. Definitely not going to use it for anything. Yeah, somebody sent me a video of, he said, the Kabbalistic cross I see as the cube in the center of the hexagram. What's up, Twisted Reality? Ever heard of mucid plaque? Yeah. What the fuck is this? That's random. Hold on. Where's the last question? That I was in the middle of answering it. There's the mother one. Mucoid plaque. I swear I just saw another question that I missed. Did I just imagine that? Can't be. Were you ever interested in phenomena of Charles Manson as he was an outlaw shaman like you. I wouldn't say interested in the phenomena, but I noticed I noticed that he was enlightened as fuck, and that what happened basically, and I flirted with this a little bit. I think is this happens to most of us, men in particular, where you realize the ego inflation stage. You know, it's part of the process. You realize that you are a fragment of like the Most High, but you forget that a cell in your arm is not higher or lower than a cell in your palm. And you mistake yourself for the Most High, like incarnate specifically that. Luckily, I had a little bit too much awareness of like, that trap to fully step into it. But, mind you, everything I thought was basically happening almost as fast as I could think it. So it kind of seemed like, it was like a logical deduction to make almost. And the people around me were kind of starting to think that or something, and I sympathize with the man, I did not step in the trap. But what I'm getting at is that a lot of people don't make it past that point. And he's one of those people. He stepped into that ego inflation pit and perished with the dogs of reason. Or in their absence or whatever, But yeah, he is definitely on another level. But I don't really see any reason to like give him much thought or time, I thought I saw something else too. Why did you ask me about mucoid plaque? Cabalist cross I see as the cube in the center of the hex ray. Oh, that's what I was responding to. You should look at what an unfolded tesseract looks like. There's videos on YouTube. Instead of getting high with music tonight, please listen to meh. Well, whatever, man. I was planning to do a music stream tonight, but my machine is lagging too much, and I can't stand sounding like I'm out of time. So I just couldn't do it. All right, guys. It is 1:14 in the morning. If anyone has anything they'd like to throw out there, I'm down to field a couple more questions. Otherwise, I'm going to eat some pickles and summon some demons or something. No, I'm just kidding. I've never bothered with that kind of thing. Black magic is not smart. I do not recommend it to anyone. And a lot of people are selling it these days packaged as something other than evil. Don't fall for that. And some of them believe it. I know people that actually believe it, that they're like working for the light somehow by doing black magic. And in a sense, they are, of course. There's not a grain in the sand, not a grain of sand in the universe that's out of place, right? So this is why we don't hate the Black Brothers. They serve a fundamental purpose. And if you need a clue as to what that is, think about opposites generating each other, and then think about what happened in the New Testament, and then you'll realize why people aren't necessarily wrong when they say his name's not Yeshua, it's Satan, and he is the savior of the world. From the darkness must come out the light. But we all have to play our role. The world is indeed a stage, and we are indeed players, performers and portrayers, each another's audience. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, we need every piece of the puzzle. But I don't choose. My fundamental nature dictates to me what I am, and it's not a black brother. So to each their own. But I'm not finna get down like that. watch Peruvian Torch live plant for first time, San Pedro trip. Well, don't do it alone, first of all. And it depends, man. Every cactus is different. They can vary by 10x. Peyote's even worse in terms of the potency variations. But generally, for me, about 18 inches of, if it's like that thick, I don't know. But for a lot of people, that would be too much. So I would say start with like 12 and drink half of it. And the thing is, like, it takes 3 hours to peak. So you need to wait and make sure, because it is an all too common mistake to think, man, it's been forever, I'm going to take another shot. Next thing you know, somebody's naked and running around screaming or whatever. And so you don't want that. And so, caution. More thoughts on black magic. The problem with black magic is that there's no compensation. So it is said that you can get anything you want in the world, but everything must be paid for. And so if you just take and take and take, oh, it's a cookie. What was I saying? Without any law of compensation, there's no balance. And so the belief in the mystery tradition is that every magician comes to a crossroads, and you have to make a choice whether you're going to be a white hat and serve the collective. And that doesn't mean to the extent that you're like denying yourself and being an ascetic and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean that. It just means that at least you're not going to hurt anything unless you have to. It's not that grueling of a commitment. But there is the possibility of doing whatever you want to whoever you want, whenever you want, for the rest of your life, and having whatever you want. And in that case, you are also sacrificing yourself for the greater good. When they say that the universe is all love, this is the kind of weird shit that has to be tolerated in order to make that true, right? So because good generates evil and evil generates good, the black magician doing the ultimate evil is creating the ultimate good. And the cost is his conceptual continuity. He does not reincarnate with awareness. His parts are added to the rubble heap of Karanzan, the demon of confusion, and the gods of the future will be assembled from them. So he's sacrificing his eternal life in order to create salvation for mankind. And that's not his motivation, but that's the consequence of his deed. And that's the logic behind the sacrifice of Christ in the Bible. That's why that's the reasoning. And that comes from the mystery tradition knowledge. They just took that and built the story in the Bible around it. So that's the deal. If we didn't need the Black Brothers, they wouldn't exist. But I would rather not play that role myself, I guess. Yeah, cheers, guys. I'm too tired to be coherent, I think, at this point. So I'm going to bed. But thank you for being here. And please hit the like button, share, subscribe. Consider becoming a patron. You get access to all kinds of stuff other people don't have access to. If you want to be one of the cool kids, you got to be in the cool kid club. And you can hang out with us in our private Discord and whatnot. Law of reciprocity is where it's at. There's nothing you can do to get around that. So cheers, guys. I will see you Tuesday.